Well, Friday was the pagan cross-quarter celebration of Imbolc, halfway between winter solstice and the spring equinox. In the Irish tradition, the goddess Breed, or Bridget, is associated with this holiday. The name Imbolc means in the belly, referencing in the belly of the Mother Earth. It is sometimes also called Emolc, or ewe's milk, because it's the season of the midwinter when the ewes, the sheep, would start lactating. Bridget, as we heard in the story this morning, was the goddess of grain. So this time halfway to spring was when people traditionally began to first prepare for the spring planting. When Ireland was Christianized, a number of things happened. Bridget was made a saint. That was part of the, if you can't beat them, join them tactic of Christianizing the Celts. The Catholic Church began to celebrate the purification of Mary at this time, being 40 days after the birth of Jesus, a time of ritual purification in the Jewish tradition. And the church also celebrated something called Candlemas, during which, at this time, the church's candles would be blessed. So all these traditions come down to us, and among the many ways we celebrate them is a festival centered around a large rodent. In central Pennsylvania, in the town of Punxsutawney, a groundhog named Phil awoke from hibernation on Friday, peeped out of his marmot hole, and saw his shadow. So a traditional verse goes, "If Candlemas Day be fair and bright, winter will have another flight. If Candlemas Day brings cloud and rain, winter won't come again." And so it was Friday in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. The groundhog paradox happened once again. Phil the groundhog saw his shadow, and thus the legend says, we're in for 6 more weeks of winter. I've always been puzzled by this groundhog forecast. One would think that if the groundhog sees its shadow, spring would come early, because for a shadow you need sun to make the shadow, which is nice weather. So wouldn't nice weather be an omen of nice weather to come more quickly? But no, that's not how it works. It's the opposite. If Phil sees his shadow and it's sunny, we're doomed for 6 more weeks of winter. Which we are anyway, because spring starts in 6 weeks, whether it's rainy or sunny or snowy anyway. I've never understood this whole paradox around the groundhog thing. But it really, really stupefies me. It's sunny, but we're going to have more winter. So it is. It seems to me in general, excuse me, that the amount of winter is more about us than the groundhog's shadow or the days on the calendar. Because astronomical spring will be on March 22nd, regardless of rodent forecasts, I think it's an internal matter for us when we decide to change seasons. We gather this morning halfway to spring. In many ways not unlike our ancestors who observed the world around them long ago and held fire festivals to continue to encourage the sun to lengthen its stay each day in the sky. Festivals to call upon the earth to begin to be ready to be fruitful, for the greenery and the food to return again. Like the hedgehog, our ancestors had to decide to keep hibernating or to wake up a little bit and start making preparations for moving on to spring. In the old world, under the old ways, our ancestors would have been through a rough 6 weeks. Have all the winter supplies lasted well enough? Were there enough of them? Is there enough stored away to make it till spring, when the planting begins and the first fruits and new hunting will begin to provide for our needs once again? Each winter our ancestors had a choice to be made. when they reach this point of the winter, to continue to conserve the stores put away, or to begin to use a little more of them to get ready to prepare for the coming of spring and the planting. It's always a little bit of a gamble. If they started to be more active, they would be using more of the stores than they had been. But if they laid low too long, they'd miss the ideal times for planting. By watching the stars and the sun and the weather, they started to figure out when the midpoint was, when the ideal time would be to not be so afraid to use a little more of the stores, to get ready to make the spring fruitful once again. And this is where we find ourselves as a community this morning. Each year, we begin our annual stewardship drive about this time. We look at the stores, and over recent years, our stores have grown a little tight. Our belts have tightened in response, and we prepare to do less, as the coming spring doesn't look like a good year for the crops. We want an early spring, but we fear for the cold of winter. Best to err on the side of caution and conserve those winter supplies, for there may not be enough to go around. We best be careful. At some point in their journey, our ancestors had to trust that the sun would return, that their efforts would be successful, that come what may during planting and harvesting season, they had it within themselves to make the season plentiful, that the spirit inside them would be greater than their circumstances. And so we too must now trust ourselves to prepare for spring. Whatever the weather, it is our attitude and our approach that determines whether winter seems long or rebirth seems like it comes early. There are two ways we can approach this situation of midwinter: scarcity or abundance. The scarcity mentality we heard in our reading this morning is limiting. It may seem like a good plan at first, but over time, too much energy gets wasted on conflict, negative thinking, stifled creativity, and anxiety. On the other hand, the abundance mentality is beyond individual egos. It is a bit more fearless, more free. It is beneath no one and superior to no one. And I think that's why Penny Tremblay says it is full of magic. What are the benefits of the abundance mentality when it comes to human interaction? Characteristics of integrity, maturity, and an abundance mentality have the ability, she says, to create win-win situations. Scarcity is generally pessimistic, entitled, and fearful. Abundance is generally optimistic, thankful, and confident. With scarcity thinking, there is never going to be enough. With abundance thinking, there will always be more, somewhere where the last came from or somewhere else. Scarcity tends to think small. Abundance tends to dream big. Scarcity tends to be stingy with knowledge, information, a willingness to share, contacts, and resources. But abundance is free with knowledge and information. It loves to share. It loves to create more resources by sharing. A scarcity mentality defaults to an attitude of suspicion of others. Abundance can only work because it operates on a basis of trusting others. Scarcity resents competition and frequently creates struggles for power and control. Abundance welcomes competition and realizes that we are all in it together. And thus, instead of the scarcity mentality for as much as you win, I lose, with abundance, it's either we all win or we all lose. Scarcity mentalities want to make bigger and bigger walls and smaller bridges. Abundance mentality wants to make bigger and bigger bridges and tear down walls. I want to invite you to enter into our stewardship drive this year with an attitude of abundance. Let's take an honest assessment of our resources. Let's realize spring is coming, and let's invest in ourselves and in our dreams. 150 years ago this year, this congregation joined the Worcester County Association of Unitarian Churches. Even back then, our religion couldn't have a short name. We stand here this morning as a stubborn group of survivors, and our task is to dream forward into the next 150 years. There are many accomplishments we can name over the last 150 years. What I want to focus on is what accomplishments will they talk about 150 years from now. I want you to think about something. What would you want everyone in the Unitarian Universalist Association universe to read about Hopedale Unitarian Parish when we are named a UUA Breakthrough Congregation? What's a breakthrough congregation? I knew you were going to ask that, so I'm going to tell you. Breakthrough congregations. A breakthrough congregation has shifted gears. The new focus celebrates and shares innovative ways congregations are adapting to the challenges that they face in this changing modern religious landscape. A successful breakthrough congregation demonstrates an innovation or adaptation that is entirely new to the congregation and could be useful to other congregations. Innovations may be either sustainable or bold one-time changes of great impact and meaning. It is not about numerical growth, congregational size, or even the type of congregational programming. Here's some examples of recent winners. All Souls UU in Belleville, Ohio, chose to overcome their fear and embrace the call of our faith to support the anti-racism work taking place in their surrounding community. The UU congregation of Greater Lansing, Michigan, is doing exciting cross-cultural work with the local Muslim community and has found vibrant ways to live into a faith partnership with them. The UU Fellowship of Athens, Georgia, is utilizing volunteer staff across generations, honoring their gifts and skills for congregational work. First Unitarian Church of Oakland, California, has a groundbreaking adaptation of religious education to meet the changing needs of their families. In the future, when Hopedale Unitarian Parish is recognized by the Unitarian Universalist Association as a breakthrough congregation, what will be said about us when the award is presented at General Assembly and printed in the UU World magazine? I invite you all to dream that this stewardship season. The stewardship team, the finance committee, and the board are going to ask you to enter into a conversation beginning at lunch to think about where we're going. What do we want to do? Notice that they're not starting the conversation with, well, what can we afford? That's a scarcity mentality. What they're starting with is, what do we want to do? Who do we want to be? Dang it, what do we want them to say about us? So, my invitation to you, approach this season. Be generous. Think in abundance. Don't be afraid to dream. For achieving dreams begins with an idea of what that dream and the goal will be. Let's cast dreams together. Let's plan responsibly and invest in ourselves to achieve them. Let's make a breakthrough that the entire Unitarian Universalist Association will hear about, because it will be such good